An unapologetic, no frills take on what would really happen if human beings developed superpowers. The Boys shows us that godlike power doesn't equal benevolence, that superiority can very easily turn into tyranny and insanity. But you know what's crazy? The characters we see in the show are watered down versions of their original counterparts from Garth Ennis' comics. And if you think the show's messed up, you're not ready for the rest of this video. Today, we'll be looking at the real disturbing stories of 15 Boys characters that were diluted to their core. And we'll give you a trigger warning right now because you're gonna need it.
I can't stop.
A-Train. The story of Reggie Franklin is perhaps one of the best redemption arcs in recent memory. Eric Kripke gave A-Train a developing conscience, compelling family drama, and a complex, layered characterization involving drug addiction, struggles with morality, heart problems, and systemic racism. It makes for great TV, and Jesse T. Usher absolutely crushes the portrayal of this bad guy turned good. But it also completely washes away the unrepentant cruelty of the original character. In the comics, there is no redemption arc for A-Train, because he doesn't deserve it. He's an unapologetic, remorseless monster who laughs about killing Robin after feeling sorry about it for the grand total of 1 second. He's involved in Starlight's assault, unlike the show, where it's just the Deep, and he dislikes her popularity so much that he tries assaulting her again. She manages to get away from him by temporarily blinding him, and that's something we'll never see in the show. Neither will we see him get his original fate, because comic A-Train is an immature, purely vile antagonist who gets exactly what he deserves when he's kidnapped by the Boys and Huey literally kicks his head off. He kills his first girlfriend and assaulted his other girlfriend twice, and he did it all while wearing that idiotic grin on his face. It's safe to say we like Reggie Franklin because if we got comic book A-Train, people would start hating on Jesse T. Usher for portraying him. Ezekiel from the show is a loose adaptation of Oh Father from the comic, which gets a bit complicated in the finale season of The Boys because Oh Father is now canon. He's a parody of evangelical megachurch leaders who hide their predation behind religious curtains. Oh Father systemically grooms, abuses, and discards young boys he labels as his sidekicks. And while Amazon's Oh Father has a similar backstory, the show never goes so far as to show us how he treats his sidekicks. And before his inclusion, Ezekiel was his replacement. And he's a bad guy, but he's not nearly as bad as being an unrepentant child molester. Ezekiel is just a hypocritical, closeted pastor who runs Capes for Christ and likes to make out with men at a private soup club while preaching against homosexuality in public. He's corrupt and twisted, yes, and the fact that Butcher kills him takes away one more disturbing element from the church. But he lacks the systemic, deeply disturbing, Epstein-level predation of his comic book inspiration. And what makes this worse is the fact that the real Oh Father is now a part of the series, and he's cozying up with Ashley Barrett of all people, another known sexual deviant. So really, we got off easy with Ezekiel in a way, because things could have been a lot worse had Eric Kripke decided to make him quote-unquote comic accurate. Lamplighter. The show's Lamplighter is given a sympathetic arc with genuine remorse, leading to a tragic suicide. His death was faked. He was forced to help Vought torture and kill people at Sage Grove in the name of experimentation, and before his death, he helped the Boys out by assisting in their break-in to Vought Tower. We will admit it was a little jarring seeing Shawn Ashmore watching soup porn like it's a TV show, but hey, not all characters can be perfect, right? But even as vile as show Lamplighter was before his suicide, the comic version was way worse, because in many ways, he was Aerys Targaryen, aka the Mad King. In the comics, the Seven tried to stop 9/11 from happening. Yeah, that's a real thing. And when they failed, Lamplighter retired. Vought covered it up, the Boys found out, and when they blackmailed the Seven, Lamplighter lashed out by whining about being hurt in the ribs and needing to bargain with these puny humans. In the show, Mallory wanted to blackmail him into becoming the CIA's mole, and him killing her grandchildren was accidental because he was looking for Mallory. But in the comics, Lamplighter dug his own grave. He decided to kill Mallory's grandchildren to send a message. And because he's a pyromaniac like Aerys, Lamplighter got aroused by his fiery antics as well. In fact, he was addicted to the feeling, and this act made the Seven see him as a liability. They handed him over to the Boys, who ultimately beat him to within an inch of his life before Mallory shot him in the head. But that wasn't the end for him. because Vought reanimated Lamplighter with limited intelligence, kept him locked in a basement where he would play with his own feces, and used cleaning his prison as punishment for supes who stepped out of line. As bad as Ashmore's version was, it wasn't nearly as horrific as the OG Lamplighter, and now you know why. Vic the Veep. Victoria Neuman is honestly one of our favorite characters from Amazon's The Boys. She's a cunning, head-popping political operator who's 10 steps ahead of the competition and supremely confident in her own abilities. Claudia Dumit absolutely crushed the role of female Icarus, miscalculating her rise to power, which is a step up from the original Vic the Veep, because that guy is just yikes. The comics Victor Neuman is something else entirely. A violent, intellectually stunted sex addict who serves as a biting parody of George W. Bush. He's both a nepo baby and an incredibly cruel employer. He cannot string a sentence together without coaching from handlers, and requires Secret Service agents to physically dress him before his sexual encounter. At the same time, he also makes those same agents do things no sane man would subject their employees to, including guarding him at Herogasm, which he actively participates in. His entire characterization is built around mocking his incapacity, something that would never fly in modern television. And unlike Victoria, Victor actually becomes the president of the United States. When he's killed by Homelander in the comics, we breathe a sigh of relief because it wasn't murder. It was a mercy for our eyes and brains. And compared to him, Vicky is rainbows and sunshine and sprinkles that top your softie, and some of those are even pepper. Queen Maeve. In the show, Queen Maeve has a redemption arc, a homosexual relationship with her girlfriend Elena, and even becomes a proper superhero by the time she assists Butcher and Starlight with taking down Stormfront as well as Homeland. And most importantly, Maeve is still alive, though depowered. And when she goes off into the sunset with her girlfriend, we're actually happy for her. That can't be said for comic book Maeve, because that girl is such a mess that even when she eventually does help out the good guys, her death feels somewhat warranted. Comic Maeve empathizes with Starlight's plight, but she tells her to suck it up matter-of-factly, not with sympathy. And despite having more of a moral compass than the rest of the seven, she still indulges in the same vices as all of them. She's frequently seen drinking martinis or having group sex with several bodybuilders, and she's had more abortions than she can count. Despite all that, Maeve still has a couple of children running around the world, and at least her end is somewhat heroic. She helps the boys plant bugs in Vought Tower, which is a task delegated to Huey in the show, and when she's discovered, she fights Homelander and Black Noir to the death. That's another aspect of her character that's heavily changed by the TV series, because in the comics, the reason she breaks up with Homie is because he's tricked her into having sex with Black Noir after making her wear a blindfold. Maeve is abused in a way that makes her jaded nature a lot more justifiable than her show counterparts drinking and sexcapades with Butcher. And while we're not trying to belittle the trauma that Dominique McElliott's Maeve experiences, we can't say that her story isn't watered down with a straight face. Blarney Cock and the Teenage Kicks. This character represents one of Ennis's most controversial uses of shock humor, as does the rest of the team. But, at least in the show, Sage and A-Train have proper, fleshed out characters with some redeeming qualities. The rest of Teenage Kicks isn't on their level, and are probably just as bad as their comic book counterpart, but they aren't feral sex and drug addicts, and that's just a fact. All of them decide to attack the boys en masse when they leak their private activities to the world, but one of them in particular gets a fate we're glad we'll never see. Blarney Cock is one of those Queen Maeve kids we mentioned in the previous entry. He's conceived on her by the Legend, who's a very different character in the comics as well, and initially, he's raised in an orphanage in Ireland. Once his powers activate, Vought recruits him into Teenage Kicks, and there he indulges in the same antics as the rest of the team, until he's accidentally killed by Huey in his first soup confrontation. That seems like a normal thing for this series, right? But the punchline is that a hamster was found stuffed inside his when his corpse was recovered by Vought. And when Blarney Cock is later reanimated as a zombie, he seeks out Huey, not for revenge, but to reclaim the hamster for continued use. He also has the same obsession with feces as zombie Lamplighter, and the entire bit intersects gross out humor with homophobic gerbling mythology in a way that would never fly today. This is why Blarney Cock was cut entirely from the show. Well, this and his parentage. As for the rest of the Teenage Kicks, they're still debauched hedonists, no doubt about it, but they're not nearly as bad as their comic book counterpart.
God damn. Brother's got a love sausage.
Love Sausage. Love Sausage is one of the best gag characters in The Boys because, well, Brother's got a love sausage. He got his name from his enormously long prehensile which somehow isn't even the worst genitalia-based superpower in this franchise. Every time we see him, we're worried about MM, because you know that sausage is going to find a way around his neck one way or another. But here's the thing. The show reduced him to a comedy bit after introducing him as a tortured Sage Grove test subject. He's stripped of his backstory, his heroism, and he exists solely to torture Mother's Milk and his macho man image. In the comics, Vasily is a tragic, surprisingly wholesome Russian ex-superhero who runs a bar and genuinely helps the boys on several of their missions. His endowment is just a bizarre side effect of his powers that's clearly visible through his supersuit. But it isn't prehensile, and he's a powerhouse, one of the only supes who's actually a superhero. Garth Ennis' Boys had a global feel to it because many of its characters came from all across the globe, whereas in the show, only a tiny percentage of supes are based outside the United States. The real love sausage is a man who dies a heroic, brutal death, fighting a man he once considered to be his comrade. He is how we know Butcher's an actual psychopath, and we'll get to him by the end of this video, but it pains us to see one of the only truly good characters from the comics being reduced to a sight gag with a tired punchline.
If not, I will kill both of them, and when you finish screaming, crying, I will kill you too.
Little Nina. The show's Little Nina is just a standard, albeit ruthless, Russian mobster. Her interactions with Frenchie and Kimiko are menacing, yes, and the fact that she tortures Frenchie by bringing up his traumatic past, both as her hitman and with his father, is uncomfortable to watch. But Katya Winter's Nina is remarkably tame and less ambitious compared to her comic counterpart, and she probably won't get the true Little Nina's bizarre and grotesque demise. In the comics, Little Nina's nickname is Literal, because she's unbelievably petite. She's a Russian mobster who's addicted to masturbation and aligned with Vought. Her goal is to overthrow the Russian government and become its new president, so she creates a disposable army of supes using a defective, bootleg version of Compound V with Vought's help. When a specific radio frequency is activated in their proximity, all these supes' heads would explode simultaneously, and her plan was to use them to take over the Kremlin and then kill them all to take over the premiership. Sadly, that was never going to work out because Vought didn't trust her. Butcher found the bomb they left in her private jet and planted it in one of Nina's favorite toys, which she detonated when she was playing with it, leading to one of the most infamously disturbing deaths in the comics. Really, the only thing that show and comic Nina have in common is their obsession with sex, because in every other aspect, they're completely different characters.
So you get Homelander, but I can't get Soldier Boy? You're a fucking hypocrite, Butcher.
Mother's Milk's entire family. Perhaps the biggest wash job in the entirety of Amazon's The Boys is what they do to Mother's Milk, or more accurately, what they do to his history. Because in the comics, Ryan Butcher isn't the first natural-born supe. Mother's Milk is. The show gives Marvin Milk a stable, loving background, a stern but supportive wife, and a daughter that thinks he's her hero. Yeah, they hit a Todd-sized speed bump in the road, but it's clear that MM, Monique, and Janine are a unit. And most importantly, Mother's Milk is not a supe. He's a man whose family was wronged by supes, Soldier Boy in particular, and he spends his life trying to bring them to justice like his father. In the comics, Marvin was born a supe with increased strength, durability, and intelligence because he had Compound V in his vein. But to keep himself stable, he has to periodically drink his mother's breast milk even at the age of 40, which is why he's called Mother's Milk. The show changed his surname from Wallace to Milk to explain that moniker without having to touch on this obviously unsettling topic. He had a brother called Michael, who also had Compound V in his veins, but his powers caused his body to expand rapidly, which killed him when the helmet he was wearing crushed his skull. MM's ex-wife Monique is a crack addict who, in one of the most disturbing subplots in the entire comic, recruits their teenage daughter Janine into filming incest pornography with her. And Janine herself has V in her system, which causes her to look like a teenager when she's barely 12 years old and hang out with crowds she isn't wise enough to ignore. Show casuals couldn't dream up this backstory for Mother's Milk if they wanted to, because it was crafted to define just how deep Vought's fangs poison every corner of life. But it's so extreme, the show erased it entirely. And this is one backstory you won't hear us complaining about. MM is the North Star of the boys, and if he was dealing with these problems in the show as well, we don't think he'd be able to do half of what he does. So yes, Mother's Milk and his whole family have their true stories watered down, but it's for the best because the truth is deeply traumatizing. John Godolkin. This character is renamed to Thomas and turned into a charred Nazi who returns to terrorize the world with his psionic power. But as crazy as Thomas Godolkin is, he's a saint compared to John Godolkin his comic book counterpart. A clear parody of Professor X, complete with the wheelchair and everything, John Godolkin was never adapted for the show at all, and for good reason. He's a serial pedophile who kidnapped children, injected them with Compound V, and groomed and abused them to make himself their savior and quote-unquote loving father figure. He used this formula on the entire G-Men roster, who hated him, but were unable to escape him because of their conditioning. He faked their backgrounds as soup orphans he generously adopted. And while that was bad enough, in his final moments, he was about to do something even worse. How's that possible, you ask? Well, John created a new team of literal toddler soups without Vought's consent. And then the implication is that he treated them the same way he treated the G-Men before prepping them for the field. When exposed, Vought simply had a private army massacre all of Godolkin's quote-unquote kids, including Godolkin himself, because they couldn't stomach his methods and tastes. You know you're messed up when Vought keeps guys like Homelander around and eliminates you. And now you know why we called Thomas Godolkin a saint, despite his institution of a might makes right curriculum and plans for installing a Nazi regime over the world. Black Noir. This is the single biggest dilution of a character from page to screen, and it's yet another moment where we're glad the show took a different approach, because if they'd have gone comic accurate with Black Noir, Amazon would have shut down. The show made Noir a loyal soldier with a tragic backstory that involves brain damage that rendered him mute and a burning hatred for Soldier Boy. Hell, we're on our second version of Black Noir right now, and while this one can fly like Homelander, he's clearly not his clone. In the comics, Black Noir is Homelander's clone, and Homie's actually aware of this fact. That's how his quote-unquote prank on Maeve came to be, and he figured that since Noir was himself, he might as well be his best friend. What he didn't know was that Vought created Noir to kill John if he went rogue, and while he was a shitty person and a worse team leader, he never did. This caused such a massive dissonance between Noir's conditioned purpose to exist and the reality he was experiencing as Homie's bestie that his mind snapped. Unable to fulfill his promise, but also wanting to do the same, Noir disguised himself as Homelander and committed most of the atrocities he's accused of in the comics, including eating a live infant, raping Becca Butcher, and desecrating corpses. In fact, Black Noir's actions are what drove Homelander into staging his global takeover, because he thought he was blacking out and actually doing those things, and he too succumbed to madness eventually. So when it was revealed that he wasn't insane and was being framed by his clone to force Vought's hand, the terror and shock on Homelander's face almost made us feel bad for him. You know you're an absolute monster if you can make us feel bad for this sack of crap, and for that reason, we're glad the show didn't adapt Black Noir accurately. Because like we said, Amazon probably would have shut down if they did. Billy Butcher. And this brings us to the final character that's been diluted by Eric Griffin. Because while Show Butcher is complex and haunted with flaws that we can see playing out on screen, Comic Butcher is an outright monster. In the show, Butcher at least makes some attempts at being honest with himself and his friend. When he offered Huey the chance to avenge Robin, he was weaponizing him, yes, but he ended up actually connecting with Huey on a much deeper level. In the comics, he was manipulating Huey as a pawn from the very beginning, and at no point did he show any genuine affection for him. In the comics finale, after the boys have essentially won, he murders Mother's Milk, Frenchie, and the female of the species to stop them from interfering with his plans to detonate Compound V and wipe out all soups. And also because they were soups themselves. His plan included collateral human casualties as well, because he went to kill the legend, but he had a heart attack before he could. Garth Ennis himself said writing those deaths felt like murder. And the fact that Butcher wanted Huey to kill him as a way of absolving his sins is the ultimate prick move, because in the show, at least his guilt is somewhat justified. He sees Huey as his little brother Lenny, and Butcher wants to be killed by Lenny. But in the comics, he bangs Raynor in her office, kills Love Sausage to stop him from sabotaging his genocide plan, and does all sorts of things to prove he's the real villain of the series. In the show, Butcher's just a man with demons, and right now, his demons are getting the best. That's why he's a completely watered down version of his comic book counterpart. And if you've made it this far, congratulations, because that's our list of every character that has been diluted in Amazon's The Boy. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more boys content all summer long. We'll see you guys real soon with yet another video. Until then, stay safe and have a nice day.